The chamber smelled of polished steel and recycled air, an artificial perfection that never sat well with Admiral Grant Mercer. He stood alone, arms folded, boots planted square in the center of the human delegation's platform. Across the vast expanse of the Galactic Council Hall, dozens of alien species sat in tiers of translucent seating, insectoids, reptilians, avians, silicon-based entities pulsing with strange inner lights. Together they formed what was called the Unified Galactic Council, the supposed pinnacle of diplomacy and civilization in the known galaxy. To Mercer, it was a circus. At the center of the chamber, the Speaker of the Council, a towering cephalopod whose massive eyes blinked with unease, reverberated through the translators. "Esteemed delegates of Sol System, we implore humanity to reconsider. The Council offers peace, trade, and security." Mercer cut him off, voice sharp and cold. "Security? You mean submission?" A chorus of clicks, hisses, and synthetic tones erupted in the chamber, a wave of barely contained outrage. The other human delegates exchanged glances, uneasy, but Mercer stood unmoved. He'd buried too many comrades to care what these alien bureaucrats thought anymore. The Council had called this emergency session after months of failed backdoor negotiations. Humanity, fresh off its brutal victory in the Proxima campaign, had refused every demand to integrate its fleets into the so-called Council Peace Force. The aliens had expected compliance. Instead, Earth had recalled its ambassadors, fortified its borders, and tripled military production. Now they stood on the brink of open defiance. The speaker's voice rippled again. "Admiral Mercer, the galaxy cannot tolerate human aggression. Already worlds tremble at your fleet movements. Must we descend into chaos?" Mercer allowed a cold smile. "The chaos began when your fleets bombed unaligned human colonies and called it preemptive peacekeeping. We offered friendship once. You answered with blockades and sanctions." Another surge of alien noise, some angry, some fearful. On the far tier, the reptilian Kalith ambassador stood abruptly, his scaled visage twisted in anger. "Humans are a rogue species, unpredictable, violent. We warned the Council." Mercer's eyes narrowed. "You warned them after your mercenaries slaughtered miners on Titan's moons, after you seized our trading ships in Council space." The hall grew tenser. The truth hung heavy, undeniable. The Council had long viewed humanity as a useful but primitive tool, ideal for exploration, expendable in conflicts. But humanity had changed, hardened by wars, united in a way no alien species truly understood, and worse, humanity had grown powerful. With a measured breath, Mercer spoke again, his words echoing through the chamber. "Earth will no longer be bound by treaties we had no voice in creating. We will not kneel to a council that sees us as pawns. From this moment forward, humanity stands independent. All council envoys will leave Sol space within 72 hours. Silence. Then, panic. A flood of overlapping voices, screeches, warbles, metallic protests. Translation systems struggled to keep up. Some delegates stormed out. Others sent frantic messages to their governments. The Council's illusion of order was shattering. The speaker's tentacles writhed. "Admiral, this is madness. You will plunge the galaxy into war." Mercer's stare was iron. "Then prepare for war." With that, he turned on his heel. The human delegation followed without a word, boots echoing across the chamber floor. In the stunned silence that followed, one fact became chillingly clear to every alien power. Humanity had rejected diplomacy, and now the most unpredictable force in the galaxy was loose, with no leash, no chains, and no fear. The return flight to Sol was silent. Inside the Valiant, a Dominion-class diplomatic carrier retrofitted with military-grade shielding and stealth systems, Admiral Grant Mercer stood alone in the observation deck. Vast star fields streaked past the reinforced transperistyle viewport. Behind him, the crew moved with quiet efficiency. They'd been briefed before the council session. They knew this wasn't diplomacy anymore. This was the opening shot of a war no one wanted to admit was coming. Commander Jacob Rowe finally approached, a broad-shouldered, hard-eyed veteran of the Proxima and Centauri campaigns. "Admiral," he said in a low voice, "we've intercepted over 200 priority transmissions from Council channels. Panic's spreading fast. Several fleets are repositioning near the outer rim." Mercer's jaw tensed. He'd expected as much. "How long before they attempt a blockade?" Rowe's brow furrowed. 2 weeks, maybe less. They're scrambling. Can't believe we actually walked out." "Good," Mercer said simply. "Let them scramble. They won't stop us." Rowe nodded, but there was a flicker of concern in his eyes. "With respect, sir, we'll be facing an alliance of 27 species, some with fleets older than our civilization. We can't fight them all head-on." Mercer turned, the cold edge of a soldier's resolve in his gaze. "We won't fight them head-on, Commander. We fight like humans, ruthless, fast, and without mercy. That's what they fear." Back on Earth, the reaction was electric. The moment the human delegation broadcast their rejection speech, uncensored, every network on the planet exploded. Crowds filled the streets of every major city. News anchors, military analysts, and political hardliners dominated the feeds. For decades, humanity had been treated as second-class citizens of the galactic order, forced to bargain for scraps in a council that looked down on them. Now that leash had snapped. At Fort Resolution, the hardened underground military command beneath the Rockies, President Anton Rorden met with the Joint Chiefs. Rorden was an old warhawk, a man who'd spent most of his career warning of this day. Now it had come, and he was ready. "Status of the fleets?" he asked grimly. Fleet Marshal Carter replied, voice steady. 75% of all naval assets are on high alert. 6th and 9th fleets already repositioned to the Sol Gate network. The orbital defense grid is fully powered and tested. And the colonies? Fortifying as we speak. The Martian yards have accelerated production. We've begun issuing combat alerts to civilian sectors. Rorden nodded. "The Council will move fast, trying to isolate us diplomatically and economically. They'll fail. What comes next is force. Blockades, probing attacks, maybe even preemptive strikes. We will answer with strength. No compromise." There was a hard gleam in every eye around the table. No one spoke of peace anymore. The line had been crossed. The galaxy itself trembled. On council worlds, fear spread like wildfire. The humans, that brash, reckless species from a backwater star, had thrown the entire order into chaos with a few defiant words. And worse, they had the means to back it up. On Cauldron Prime, the insectoid hive mind convened in a frenzy, debating whether to recall its far-flung scout fleets before they became human targets. On Valoran, the cold-blooded Scythar Syndicate debated opening its black market arsenals to prepare for what it saw as inevitable war profiteering. Even among the mighty Thaelrin Dominion, whose war fleets had long been considered invincible, panic gripped the ruling council. The humans are mad, some argued. They will bring ruin upon themselves. But others saw the deeper truth. The humans no longer fear us, and that makes them the most dangerous species alive. Inside the dark halls of the Galactic Intelligence Directorate, Director Varric, an ancient, calculating being whose kind had manipulated empires for millennia, watched the feeds in stony silence. Humanity was no longer predictable, no longer containable. And worst of all, they had allies. Varric's agents reported disturbing patterns. certain outer system species sympathetic to humans, black market arms deals feeding Terran colonies, and rogue council members quietly moving assets to avoid being caught in the crossfire. The unity of the Galactic Council was fracturing, and fast. "This cannot stand," Varric hissed to his aides. "Begin activating assets in human space. Destabilize them. Sabotage their industries. If we cannot force them to submit, we will tear them apart from within." But on Earth, such tactics had already been anticipated. Admiral Mercer stood before the Council of Defense, his voice calm but steel-edged. "They will try subversion first, assassinations, sabotage, false flag operations. We will answer swiftly. Intelligence and counterintelligence assets are to operate under wartime protocols. No quarter." Across the planet, sleeper agents were identified, detained, or eliminated within hours of activation. Civilian morale, far from faltering, only grew harder. On the industrial megastations of Mars, workers painted the words "Never Again" across massive hulls of new battleships. On Europa's icy colonies, miners volunteered en masse for planetary militias. On Luna, orbital shipyards ran triple shifts under blackout conditions. Humanity wasn't breaking. It was sharpening. In orbit around Earth, aboard the flagship Indomitable, Mercer met with his senior commanders. "Hear me clearly," he told them, voice hard as iron. "The Council will move to isolate Sol first. That gives us one advantage: initiative. We will not wait behind our defenses. We will strike first, and hard." Eyes lit with grim purpose. "Operation Dawnfall begins immediately. Targets: enemy sensor arrays, supply convoys, communication relays. We will blind them. We will bleed them. And when they are reeling, we will decide where to break them next." There were no objections. Every man and woman in that room had buried comrades under alien fire. The time for restraint was long past. As the human fleets began mobilizing, panic spread anew across the Galactic Council. Emergency sessions devolved into shouting matches. Some species called for overwhelming force, others urged retreat and diplomacy. But amidst it all, one truth remained. The humans had seized the initiative. On the frontier worlds, skirmishes erupted. Council patrols ambushed by swift human strike teams. Listening posts went dark. Trade convoys vanished without a trace, each blow calculated, precise, and brutal. And then came the message, broadcast across all Council frequencies, spoken in unflinching human tone. "We offered friendship. You answered with betrayal. Now you will learn the price of underestimating humanity. There will be no more warnings, no more talks. Prepare yourselves." The Council was paralyzed. The humans were not bluffing. They were coming. And on Earth, as battle plans unfolded and war loomed ever closer, Admiral Mercer allowed himself a rare moment alone. He stood once more at the viewport of the Indomitable, Earth turning slowly below, battered, imperfect, but theirs. He whispered the words he'd carried for years. "They thought we would kneel. Now they'll see how humans fight when there's nothing left to lose." The first Council fleets entered the Sol border 3 days later. It was a show of force, or so they thought. 37 warships, mixed across 6 species, advanced under the banner of an emergency peacekeeping task force. Their orders were clear: establish a perimeter around the jump gates, halt all traffic, and prepare to enforce a blockade. What they hadn't counted on was just how ready humanity was for them. At Lagrange Point 3, concealed among vast debris fields and sensor-jamming platforms, the Erebus strike wing waited in complete silence. Admiral Mercer had planned this moment with cold precision. Let the Council forces come in bold and arrogant. Let them think humanity would posture and hesitate. Instead, they would bleed before they even realized the game had changed. Captain Dane Harrow, commander of the Vindicator, stood on the bridge in full battle dress. His face was hard, eyes burning with anticipation. "Fleet is moving into engagement corridor. Their flanking ships are spread too thin." Mercer's voice came through the command channel. "Execute." No prisoners. The first human salvo was not a conventional broadside. It was an electronic spear. Advanced cyber warfare viruses, seeded by stealth drones days earlier, crippled half the enemy's targeting arrays within seconds. Jamming fields followed, turning coordinated formations into a tangled mess of confused ships. And then the guns opened fire. Rail cannon rounds the size of small transports tore through shields and hulls alike. Plasma lances shredded engine cores. The Council Fleet's vanguard ship, a Thalran battleship bristling with antique but powerful weaponry, was reduced to a molten wreck in under a minute. Panic spread through the enemy formation. The Council admirals had prepared for a standoff, not a slaughter. Now, as ship after ship vanished from their tactical displays, they faced the terrifying truth. Humanity was hunting them like prey. On board the Vindicator, Harrow watched with grim satisfaction. "Target priority? Command ships. Cut off their leadership." Missiles streaked across the void, leaving trails of electromagnetic interference in their wake. A Valoran carrier disintegrated in a brilliant flash, its fighter wings never even launched. A K'lith cruiser, engines crippled, spun helplessly into a debris field, its crew venting desperate distress signals that no one would answer. Within 45 minutes, the entire Council task force lay in ruin. The shockwave reverberated across the galaxy. The Council chambers descended into chaos. Furious demands for retaliation clashed with desperate pleas for renewed diplomacy. News of the battle, complete with intercepted human combat footage, spread across every channel. One broadcast clip in particular went viral. A Council admiral screaming for retreat as his ship's bridge was torn apart by railgun fire, the human war anthem Iron Will blaring in the background. Director Varric of Galactic Intelligence watched the footage in cold silence. The humans had not merely attacked, they had sent a message of total defiance. "They seek to provoke us," one aide hissed. "No," Varric replied, his voice like sharpened stone. "They seek to teach us fear." But even as Council war councils argued and blustered, the human offensive expanded. Operation Dawnfall entered its second phase. Disruption. Fast attack frigates and Black Ops teams struck deep into Council supply lines. Listening posts along the rim burned. Convoys vanished without trace. Communications hubs flickered and died. Human cyber warfare units, operating from hidden stations beyond Pluto's orbit, unleashed cascading digital attacks that crippled entire sectors of Council infrastructure. Banks froze. Fleet orders went unprocessed. Civilian transports found themselves stranded. Panic set in. For the first time in centuries, the vaunted Galactic Council no longer controlled the flow of war. The humans did. In the shadows of this chaos, Admiral Mercer convened with the Earth Defense High Command aboard the Indomitable. "The Council will attempt a unified counteroffensive," he said, voice hard as iron. "They will seek to overwhelm us with numbers and force us back into negotiation." "Let them come," Captain Harrow growled. "We've got more than enough surprises left for them." Mercer nodded. "But we must stay unpredictable. No static defenses, no fixed battle lines. We bleed them with speed and ruthlessness." He gestured to a star map. "Next targets, key refueling stations along the Andros corridor. Cut their fuel supply, and their fleets won't reach us in strength. Strike teams are already en route." There was no debate. Orders were given. Humanity was not interested in playing by the old rules anymore. Meanwhile, the Council's political order was fracturing under the strain. On Thalran Prime, the Dominion's War Council faced bitter divisions. The younger warlords demanded an all-out crusade against humanity. The elder strategists counseled caution, their eyes haunted by fresh intelligence reports. "They fight with a fury beyond logic," one general warned. "This is not mere rebellion. They fight as if they have already embraced the cost of total war." But pride was a powerful drug. Across the council, many species could not accept the idea that humans, once dismissed as primitive upstarts, could hold such power. A massive fleet mobilization was ordered. Hundreds of ships drawn from across the member worlds would converge in a show of overwhelming force. The goal was simple: breach the Sol perimeter, force humanity to its knees, and restore the illusion of council supremacy. Admiral Mercer anticipated this. "Let them gather," he told his command staff. "When they commit their bulk, we strike where they are weakest, hit their flanks, their supply lines, never fight them on their terms." He gazed out over the fleet displays. More than 300 human warships now stood ready, sleek and deadly. Dozens more were coming online every week. But Mercer understood the deeper truth. Humanity's true weapon wasn't steel or plasma, it was resolve. Every soldier, every pilot, every civilian, they fought not for conquest or glory, but because they knew what awaited if they failed. The Council had taught them that with blood and betrayal. Now, humanity was teaching the galaxy a lesson in return. In a hidden war room beneath Geneva, President Rorden addressed the planetary governors and military leaders. "We stand alone, yes," he said, voice raw with conviction. "But we stand united, and that is why we will not break. The Council has underestimated us for too long." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "They believe fear will divide us. They are wrong. They believe overwhelming numbers will crush us. They are wrong." He leaned forward. "Humanity does not bow. Humanity does not beg. And if they want war, then by God we will give them a war they will never forget." Far across the stars, in the cold dark of deep space, human strike groups prepared for their next phase. Stealth ships armed with advanced gravitic disruptors stalked Council assembly points. Orbital mines were seeded in the approaches to key systems. Infiltration teams moved to sabotage fuel depots and sensor arrays. For every Council move, humanity had a counter-move. And with every blow struck, the legend of human defiance grew. And aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Mercer stood once more before his fleet commanders. "The Council believes they are preparing for a decisive battle," he said. "What they are truly preparing for is defeat." He looked each man in the eye. "This is the moment we forge the future, not just for Earth, but for every human world, every child who will grow up free because we chose to fight." A pause. No mercy. No retreat. No surrender. Across the stars, panic continued to grip the Galactic Council. For the first time in recorded history, the Council was on the defensive. And humanity, the species they had sought to dominate and control, now led the dance of war. The message was clear to all. Humanity had rejected diplomacy. And now, the galaxy would burn. The Council called it Operation Starfall, a grand offensive to end the human rebellion before it became an unstoppable contagion. 500 ships from 18 member species gathered from across known space. Carriers, dreadnoughts, battle cruisers, a force meant to terrify and overwhelm. They advanced in carefully staggered waves toward the Sol system, their admirals convinced that sheer mass would shatter the human defenses. But they were walking into a trap. In the dark of the Kuiper Belt, beyond the Council's long-range sensors, the bulk of the human fleet waited, not in formation, not in static lines, but scattered in strike groups and hunter packs. Admiral Mercer had studied every campaign the Council had waged over the centuries. Their strategy always relied on overwhelming force, linear advances, and centralized command. Predictable, rigid, arrogant. Humanity would respond with chaos and precision. Aboard the Indomitable, Mercer stood with Captain Harrow, both watching the incoming fleet data. "They've committed fully," Harrow said, a grim smile on his face. "No reserves." "Good," Mercer replied. "That means they'll bleed harder." He turned to the fleet-wide channel. "All units, Operation Hammerfall is go. Engage at will. No prisoners." The Council's first wave entered the outer system at Saturn's orbit. Their sensors, degraded by human jamming fields, barely detected the threat before it struck. From the shadowed rings of Saturn, swarms of human stealth drones launched devastating EMP strikes. Shields flickered and died. Engines stalled. Command ships lost comms and navigation. And then the hunter groups descended. Human cruisers, smaller and faster than their Council counterparts, moved in coordinated packs. They didn't slug it out head-on. They struck surgically, flanking and gutting isolated ships before vanishing back into the void. One by one, the Council Vanguard ships disappeared from the tactical grid, their wreckage scattering across the system. On the bridge of the Council flagship Vokthar's Pride, Grand Admiral Starn watched in disbelief as his battle lines crumbled. "This is impossible!" he roared. "Find those human ships! Restore formation!" But his officers could barely track their own fleet, let alone the enemy. Human cyber warfare had blinded half their systems. And then came the second blow. From a hidden launch platform near Titan, a wave of heavy torpedoes slammed into the Council's fuel carriers and ammunition ships. Secondary explosions rippled through the fleet's rear echelon, cutting off resupply and throwing the entire advance into chaos. By the second day of the battle, the Council offensive was in disarray. What was meant to be a crushing advance had turned into a desperate fight for survival. And humanity was only getting started. Admiral Mercer issued his next order. Deep penetration strikes. Long-range human battle groups bypassed the crippled Council fleets and moved into enemy rear sectors. They targeted communication hubs, fuel depots, and command relays. Entire star systems went dark overnight. Council outposts burned. The message was clear. There was no safe space anymore. Meanwhile, inside the Council chambers on Elthus Prime, political panic reached a fever pitch. Emergency sessions collapsed into shouting matches. Some members demanded immediate retreat. Others screamed for total war. But beneath the chaos, fear spread like wildfire. The unspoken truth was now obvious to all. The humans were not fighting for territory or treaties. They were fighting to break the old order entirely. And worse, they were winning. Director Varric watched the Council collapse with cold satisfaction. "Fools," he whispered. "You provoked an enemy you did not understand." But even Varric knew the war was entering a dangerous phase. If humanity's momentum wasn't stopped soon, the entire balance of galactic power would unravel. Desperate measures were needed. On the Council's orders, Varric activated his most ruthless assets, the Black Talons, deep-cover assassins and saboteurs planted years ago across human space. Their orders were clear: sow chaos, assassinate key leaders, cripple industrial capacity from within. But once again, they underestimated humanity. Within hours of the first Black Talon attacks, human counterintelligence struck back with brutal efficiency. Dozens of enemy agents were exposed and executed. Entire sabotage cells were wiped out in coordinated sweeps. In one widely broadcasted incident, a captured Council assassin was paraded before the media, forced to confess the Council's Black Ops campaign. Public outrage surged. Civilian militias swelled with volunteers. If the Council had hoped to intimidate Earth into submission, they had only hardened its resolve. Meanwhile, Admiral Mercer prepared for the next phase: the counter-invasion. For too long, humanity had fought defensively. Now the time had come to carry the war back into Council space. In the war room of the Indomitable, Mercer laid out the plan. We hit them where it hurts. Core supply hubs, shipyards, their home systems. No sanctuary, no safe harbors. Captain Harrow grinned. About time. Operation Iron Tide began 3 days later. Human carrier groups launched deep strike missions into Council territory, supported by stealth cruisers and long-range raiders. On the industrial world of Carthos V, human commandos detonated the primary orbital shipyard, setting production back years. On Velarin Prime, drone swarms overwhelmed planetary defenses and destroyed critical energy grids. And on the frontier world of Ithral, a human-led resistance movement rose in open revolt, seizing Council arsenals and driving their overseers into the wilderness. For the first time in living memory, the Council was losing territory, and with every human victory, the old alliances weakened. Among the lesser species of the Council, fear became a powerful force. Some began questioning their loyalty. Others secretly opened backdoor channels to Earth, offering intelligence in exchange for future leniency. Mercer encouraged this instability. Let them fracture, he told his intelligence chief. Divide them. The more they fight each other, the easier it will be to break them completely. Back on Earth, President Rorden addressed the world once more. His words were simple and unflinching. We did not seek this war, but now that it is upon us, we will see it through to the end. No peace until our enemies are broken. No surrender. No retreat. Across human space, his words ignited fresh resolve. Shipyards worked around the clock. New weapons platforms were deployed to the front lines. Civilian industries converted to wartime production. And most importantly, the human spirit remained unbroken. Meanwhile, the Council's second wave offensive stalled completely. With supply lines shredded and command cohesion lost, surviving Council fleets began a chaotic retreat. Human hunter groups pursued them ruthlessly, striking at stragglers and crippling fleeing warships. What had begun as Operation Starfall ended in catastrophic defeat. And aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Mercer watched the enemy retreat unfold. He allowed himself a rare, grim smile. They thought they could break us, he said quietly. Now they know the truth. He turned to his officers. This is only the beginning. As the war entered its next phase, one truth echoed across the galaxy. Humanity had rejected diplomacy, and now nothing would stop them from reshaping the stars in their image. The fall of Operation Starfall sent tremors through every Council-controlled world. What was meant to be a show of strength had turned into a massacre. Worse, humanity hadn't just stopped their fleets, they'd hunted them like prey. Now a new, deeper fear spread among the Council's leaders, the fear that humanity had grown unstoppable. In the shadowed halls of the Council chambers on Elthus Prime, emergency meetings became daily events. Fewer and fewer member species attended in person. Some withdrew entirely. The alliances that once held the galaxy in check were fracturing under the weight of defeat. Admiral Koresh of the Thalrin Dominion, one of the few remaining voices for total war, slammed a clawed fist onto the table. Cowards! If we fall back now, we cede the stars to these savages. But the Clith ambassador, scales dulled with fear, hissed in reply. You would have us throw more lives into the fire? We cannot stop them. We can barely track their movements. Even Director Varric remained silent, his once commanding voice tempered by grim calculation. His intelligence networks had failed to predict the sheer ferocity and effectiveness of humanity's war machine. Worse, several of his own species' worlds were now openly questioning their loyalty to the Council. The cracks are spreading faster than expected, he thought coldly. This is no longer a war of containment. It is a war for survival. And humanity showed no signs of slowing. From the orbiting war room aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Mercer issued his next set of orders. Phase 3. Invasion of core systems. For the first time in the war, humanity would take the fight directly to the heart of Council space, not with static invasions, but with deep penetration raiding forces and surgical strikes designed to destabilize entire regions. Mercer stood before his assembled commanders, voice cold and sharp. "The Council still believes they can outlast us," he said. "They cling to the illusion of centralized power. We will shatter that illusion." He gestured to the holographic map of Council space. "Key targets: Velarin Prime shipyards, Aelthus Prime data networks, Thalrin Dominion's military assembly worlds. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we leave them bleeding." Captain Harrow, his face carved from stone, nodded. "And what about their civilian populations?" Mercer's gaze was unflinching. "Collateral damage is inevitable. They declared this war. They will learn what war truly costs." There were no objections. This was not a war for mercy. 2 weeks later, humanity's strike groups surged into Council space. At Valoran Prime, human stealth ships bypassed orbital defenses entirely, deploying deep strike teams that planted gravitic bombs within the massive orbital shipyards. The resulting explosions ripped the heart out of the Valoran fleet-building program. On Aelthus Prime, coordinated cyber attacks crippled the planet's global data networks. Banking systems collapsed, communications failed, entire sectors plunged into chaos. Even the mighty Thalrin Dominion felt the blade. Human heavy cruisers, operating in hunter-killer groups, intercepted and annihilated 2 Thalrin convoy fleets. Key assembly worlds lost critical resources. And everywhere the humans struck, they left a message burned into the wreckage. "You wanted war. Now you have it." Across Council space, panic reached new heights. In many outer systems, local governors declared neutrality or openly defected. Black markets swelled with desperate Council officials seeking to cut deals with human intelligence agents. On worlds like Ithril and Karnas III, local resistance movements, long suppressed, rose in open revolt, inspired by humanity's defiance. Mercer's strategy was working. The more pressure humanity applied, the more the Council fractured from within. But even as the Council reeled, Varric prepared a desperate counterstroke. If they could not defeat humanity militarily, they would seek to destroy them from within, through treachery and terror. Varric's Black Talons received new orders: infiltrate Sol's inner worlds and deploy bioweapons designed to cripple Earth's population. It was a gambit born of desperation. And it would fail. Human counterintelligence, hardened by years of war, intercepted the Talon teams before they even reached Earth. In a brutal series of raids, entire Black Talon cells were wiped out. The captured agents' confessions were broadcast across every human colony. Public fury ignited. President Rorden addressed the world. "They sought to poison our children, to exterminate us in the shadows. They have shown us the depths of their hatred. Now we will show them the steel of our resolve." Martial law was declared across the colonies. Production doubled, recruitment surged, and Admiral Mercer gave the order for total war. No more limited strikes, no more hesitation. From this point forward, humanity would cripple the Council's ability to ever threaten them again. Operation Iron Wrath began with terrifying speed. Human battle groups deployed planet-killer weapons, hyperkinetic rods, and gravitic destabilizers against key Council military worlds. Entire shipyards were reduced to slag. Strategic gas giants used for fuel production were destabilized, rendering entire sectors unusable. On Council border worlds, humanity deployed psychological warfare, broadcast footage of defeated Council fleets, exposed Council war crimes, and encouraged mass defections. And it worked. By the end of the first month of Operation Iron Wrath, 6 member species had formally withdrawn from the Council. Two openly sought alliances with Earth. The Council's once mighty navy was in shambles. Supply lines were severed. Communications were patchy at best. In the council chambers, what few leaders remained faced grim reality. "We have lost control," whispered the Caliph ambassador. "If we do not sue for peace, our worlds will burn." But the Thalran Dominion still howled for blood. "No peace with these upstarts. We will fight to the last." Director Varric, ever the realist, knew the truth. "It is no longer a question of if we fall," he said coldly. "It is a question of how much we lose before we do." Meanwhile, aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Mercer received new intelligence. Council forces massing at the Elthis Core Gate, a desperate attempt to defend the Council capital. Mercer's orders were swift. "We break them here," he told his commanders. "No half measures. No retreat." His fleet, now swollen with new ships, veterans hardened by relentless combat, prepared for the assault. And as the final preparations were made, Mercer addressed his officers one last time. "We did not ask for this war," he said, "but now that we are in it, we will finish it." Across the galaxy, one message was clear. Humanity had rejected diplomacy, and now nothing would stand in their way. The Council's last hope now hung on the defense of Elthis Prime, the ancient seat of galactic power. In the shadow of its mighty core gate, a final fleet had gathered, the remnants of dozens of broken navies. Nearly 300 ships, hastily reinforced with civilian craft converted for war. The Council's battered admirals and commanders hoped to make a stand here, to stall humanity's advance and force them back to the negotiation table. But in their hearts, most of them knew this was not a battle they could win. From the observation deck of the Indomitable, Admiral Mercer studied the final battle plan. The human fleet was vast now, nearly 500 warships, supported by a growing number of defected Council vessels. Stealth cruisers, heavy dreadnoughts, carrier groups bristling with fighters, every weapon humanity had built in these desperate months was now pointed at Elthis Prime. Mercer's eyes were cold. "We strike at dawn cycle," he told his staff. "I want the core gate disabled first. No escape, no reinforcements." Captain Harrow grinned like a wolf. "And the planet itself?" Mercer's voice was iron. "No restraint. No mercy." The war had long since passed the point of civility. The Council had unleashed this storm. Now they would reap its full fury. As the human fleet surged toward Elthis Prime, panic consumed the Council. Inside the capital's fortified chambers, the remaining delegates argued in desperate tones. "We must surrender," the Caliph ambassador shouted. "Our worlds burn already. If we resist further, we will be wiped from the stars." But Admiral Koresh of the Thalran pounded the table with a clawed fist. "Cowards! If we fall here, there will be nothing left. Fight to the last." Director Varric watched them in silence. His agents had already informed him half the outer member species were withdrawing support. Some were even opening secret channels to Mercer himself. The Council was dying. Varric knew it. But even so, he would not kneel. Not yet. And then the humans struck. The assault on the core gate began with terrifying precision. Human stealth cruisers emerged from the void, launching concentrated EMP strikes that blinded the gate's defense systems. Within minutes, the surrounding battle stations were gutted by hyperkinetic rods, their wreckage drifting in silent ruin. Without its gate network, Elthis Prime was now cut off. Trapped. And the main fleet advanced. Human dreadnoughts unleashed wave after wave of railgun barrages, tearing through the first layers of Council defense ships. Plasma lances carved through armored hulls like paper. Council formations, already weakened and demoralized, crumbled under the onslaught. From the bridge of the Indomitable, Mercer watched without pity. "Press the attack," he ordered. "No survivors." Captain Harrow's hunter groups moved like wolves among sheep, flanking isolated council vessels and tearing them apart. On the flagship Vakthar's Pride, Admiral Starn issued a desperate call to rally. "All ships, regroup, defend the capital." But his words were met with chaos. Entire squadrons refused to respond. Some fled. Others surrendered outright. The Council's will had broken. Then came the final blow. From deep space, humanity's carrier groups unleashed swarms of fighters and drones. They poured into the shattered Council fleet, overwhelming what little resistance remained. In a matter of hours, the skies over Aelthus Prime were clear, of everything but human steel. But the assault was not yet finished. Mercer turned to Harrow. "Target the planetary defense grid. Level it." From orbit, the human fleet began its bombardment. Planetary shields flickered and failed under relentless assault. Gravitic destabilizers pounded key military complexes into molten craters. And amidst the firestorm, human commando units deployed to the surface, hunting council leaders and securing critical infrastructure. Director Varric knew the end had come. As his command center shuddered under bombardment, he turned to his closest aides. "We must prepare for exfiltration, if humanity captures me alive." But the room's ceiling collapsed before he could finish. A single human gunship hovered above the wreckage, its weapons trained on the burning remains of the Council's last intelligence hub. Elsewhere across the city, human forces swept through with brutal efficiency. Council troops surrendered in droves. Resistance cells were crushed without hesitation. By the end of the day, the banners of Earth flew over the ruins of Aelthus Prime. In the capital's shattered chamber, Admiral Mercer stood where the Council's highest rulers once held court. Now it was a tomb. Mercer addressed the surviving council members, those who had surrendered rather than flee or die. "Your rule is over," he said coldly. "Your fleets are gone. Your worlds are defenseless. From this day forward, the galaxy will no longer be ruled by cowards and tyrants hiding behind false diplomacy." There was no applause, only stunned silence and fear, and across the stars the message spread. Humanity had not only rejected diplomacy, they had destroyed it. Back on Earth, President Rorden addressed a global audience. "It is finished," he declared. "The Council's capital has fallen. Their armies are broken, their lies exposed." He looked directly into the camera. But this is not the end. It is the beginning of a new order. One where humanity will stand unbowed, answering to no one but ourselves. Across human space, celebrations erupted. But for the soldiers of the fleet, and for Admiral Mercer, there was no time for rest. In a private war council aboard the Indomitable, Mercer addressed his most trusted commanders. "The council is broken, but not yet dead. Rogue warlords and surviving factions will try to resist. We hunt them down. We finish what we started." He met Harrow's eyes. "No mercy." Harrow grinned. "Wouldn't dream of it." As the fleet prepared for the next phase, Mercer stood alone at the observation deck, staring into the endless stars. He spoke quietly, to himself, to the ghosts of all those lost in this brutal war. "They thought we would kneel." His hand clenched into a fist. "Now they will kneel to us, or they will burn." And so the war entered its final, ruthless stage. The Council was shattered, the galaxy trembled, and humanity, once dismissed as nothing more than primitive upstarts, now stood poised to dominate the stars. Aelthus Prime lay in ruins. The ancient capital of the Galactic Council, once a symbol of order and dominion, had become a graveyard of steel and ash. But Admiral Grant Mercer knew the war was far from over. The Council's central power had collapsed. Yes, But fragments remained. Rogue warlords, splinter fleets, mercenary bands, and fanatical remnants who would never accept humanity's dominance. And so Phase 4 began. Purge and secure. From the war room of the Indomitable, Mercer addressed his high command. "We have crushed the Council's core," he began, voice cold and deliberate. "Now we sweep the outer systems. Any surviving enemy fleet is to be hunted and destroyed. Any world harboring Council loyalists will be shown no quarter." Captain Harrow leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Reports coming in. Several Thalran warlords have gone rogue. They're rallying private fleets around the Shadra Belt." Mercer nodded. "Good. Let them gather. We'll burn them all in one stroke." But it wasn't just the Thalran. Across the shattered remains of Council space, chaos reigned. The Clith homeworld was in open revolt, half its population demanding surrender to humanity, the other half arming for guerrilla war. The Valoran Syndicate worlds, once loyal profiteers of the Council, now splintered into warring factions. Some defected outright, offering intelligence and supplies to Earth in exchange for survival. Others sent assassins after human commanders. And worst of all, rumors spread of surviving Council intelligence officers orchestrating terrorist attacks on newly captured human-aligned worlds. Mercer would tolerate none of it. His orders were clear. Root out every last enemy cell. No negotiation, no compromise. The tone of the war grew darker. Human Black Ops teams, many veterans of deep space sabotage campaigns, now led brutal sweeps through the fractured sectors. Council collaborators were publicly executed. Weapon caches were detonated. In one broadcast seen across hundreds of systems, a captured Thalran warlord, infamous for ordering massacres on human colonies, was paraded before a tribunal and sentenced to death by orbital strike. The execution was filmed from space, a single kinetic rod obliterating his hidden fortress in a fiery crater. The message was simple. Defiance meant death. Yet with every success, new challenges emerged. Mercer convened with his intelligence chief, Colonel Brent Wolfe, in the darkened Strategic Command aboard Indomitable. "Reports indicate a convergence of rogue fleets," Wolfe said. "Multiple factions, Thalran, mercenaries, surviving Council admirals, gathering near the Telros cluster. Estimates, at least 150 ships." Mercer's jaw tightened. A last stand? Possibly. Or an attempt to flee beyond known space. Mercer's gaze hardened. They won't get the chance. He ordered Task Force Omega assembled, a hunter fleet led by Harrow himself. Their mission: annihilate the Telros convergence. Meanwhile, across the stars, humanity's grip tightened. On Elthus Prime, occupation forces rooted out the last pockets of resistance. The city spires were patrolled by human soldiers in full battle armor, their banners flying where Council insignias had once hung. Civilian populations, broken by months of war, submitted quickly, some out of fear, others in grudging respect. And in dozens of liberated systems, local governments now pledged loyalty to Earth. Not all willingly, but all decisively. Yet beneath the triumph, darker currents stirred. In the shadows, Council loyalists plotted revenge. On the human-aligned colony of New Vega, a devastating terrorist attack struck an orbital platform, killing thousands, including the colony's newly appointed human governor. The attack was traced to a rogue Council intelligence unit operating under the codename Shadow Fang. Mercer's response was immediate and merciless. He personally authorized Operation Black Dawn, a galaxy-wide manhunt for Shadow Fang operatives. Human strike teams swept through suspected worlds, executing known collaborators without trial. Entire Council-friendly sectors were placed under military lockdown. When critics on Earth questioned the harshness of the campaign, President Rorden stood firm. "We fight an enemy that would poison our children and slaughter us in the dark." There is no room for mercy. Public opinion remained overwhelmingly in support. The war had stripped away any illusions of peace. Humanity now fought for dominance and survival in equal measure. Meanwhile, Task Force Omega closed in on Telros Cluster. From the bridge of his flagship Vindicator, Captain Harrow surveyed the tactical maps. "Rogue fleets confirmed," his tactical officer reported. "Multiple formation clusters. Defensive posture. Looks like they're trying to buy time for key leaders to escape." Harrow's smile was predatory. "Time's up." He opened fleet comms. "All ships, weapons free, no quarter. Burn them out." The Battle of Telros Cluster was swift and brutal. Human hunter groups tore through the disorganized rogue fleets with surgical precision. Thalrin warships, once feared juggernauts, were ripped apart by coordinated railgun strikes. Mercenary frigates attempted to flee, but human stealth ships disabled their engines before they reached the jump lanes. By the battle's end, more than 120 enemy ships lay in wreckage. The rogue admirals were either dead or captured. Harrow transmitted a simple message back to Mercer. "Cluster secure. No survivors." With Telros purged, Mercer convened his senior command for the next phase. "We are approaching the final stage," he said. "The Council's structure is gone. The galaxy is fractured. Now we establish order, on our terms." He gestured to the star map, highlighting key sectors. "System by system, world by world, every remaining pocket of resistance is to be eliminated. Every planet brought under compliance." There was no dissent. The war had forged a singular vision among humanity's leadership: dominate or die. But not all battles were fought with guns. In the shadows, high-level diplomacy now unfolded. Former Council species, desperate to survive, sent envoys to Earth, offering tribute, resources, and subservience in exchange for a place in the new order. Mercer met with these envoys behind closed doors. To some, he offered terms, harsh ones: total demilitarization, human oversight of key industries. To others, those deemed untrustworthy, he offered only death. And on Earth, President Rorden prepared for the inevitable political shift. "Soon," he told his advisors, "we will not just be fighting warlords. We will be administering an empire. We must be ready to rule as ruthlessly as we fought." The old ideals of the Galactic Council were dead. Humanity would build something new, forged in war, tempered in blood. Aboard the Indomitable, Mercer stood once more at the observation deck, staring at the stars humanity had bled to conquer. He spoke quietly, voice laced with iron purpose. "They thought we were beneath them. Now they crawl before us." He turned away, gaze hard. "And we are not finished." As the purge expanded, resistance faded. The rogue warlords fell. The last of the Shadowfang was cornered. And across the galaxy, one truth became undeniable. Humanity ruled now. The war was ending, but peace was nowhere in sight. Victory had brought domination, not unity. Across the galaxy, scattered fires of resistance flickered weakly, most crushed beneath the iron heel of humanity's fleets. But the task of ruling an empire forged in blood was just beginning. And for Admiral Grant Mercer, the final phase of the campaign was the most dangerous of all: consolidation. From the newly established High Command Citadel orbiting the ruins of Aelthus Prime, Mercer surveyed reports from across occupied sectors. Colonel Wolfe stood at his side. "Most rogue fleets destroyed," Wolfe reported. "Remaining Council forces surrendering in groups. Civilian uprisings minimal, though Valoran sectors remain volatile." Mercer nodded. "And the Shadowfang remnants?" Wolfe's voice dropped. "Almost eradicated. We tracked their last network to the outer ring of Ysera 4. Strike teams moving in now." Mercer's gaze hardened. "I want them wiped out. No trials. No martyrs." Even in victory, Mercer trusted nothing. Not the defeated council species, not the defectors now swearing loyalty, not even Earth's own political circles. He had seen too much treachery, too many alliances born from fear, not respect. And treachery was still afoot. Barely a week after the final fleet engagements, an assassination attempt rocked the human command structure. A rogue Velaran noble, posing as an emissary, detonated a bomb during a diplomatic summit on the colony world of New Corinth. 5 high-ranking human governors were killed. Mercer's response was swift and merciless. Operation Iron Fist was launched. Entire Valoran noble houses were purged in coordinated strikes. Their merchant fleets were seized, their leaders publicly executed. In one notorious broadcast, a captured Valoran patriarch was forced to kneel before a firing squad of human marines. His death streamed to every corner of the fractured galaxy. The message was clear: human law was now absolute. Defy it and die. Back on Earth, President Rorden addressed the world. "This war was forced upon us," he declared, "but we have answered with strength, and we will govern with the same strength." Behind closed doors, he met with Mercer and the Defense High Command. "You've broken the Council," Rorden said. "Now you must help us build the new order, an empire that will last." Mercer's reply was grim. "Empires built on blood do not last, unless their rulers are prepared to spill more." Rorden understood. There would be no room for softness. Not now, not ever. And so the galactic dominion of Earth was born. Across occupied space, human flags replaced the banners of the old council. New governors, chosen from among Earth's hardest soldiers and most ruthless leaders, were installed on key worlds. Industrial centers were seized, resource networks redirected to Earth. Planetary militias were disarmed or folded into human command structures. The former council species learned quickly. Submission brought survival. Resistance brought extinction. On Calith Prime, the ruling caste formally bent the knee to Earth, swearing fealty in a broadcast ceremony. On Ithrol, local leaders accepted human oversight in exchange for continued autonomy, a rare concession granted only to those who had aided the human cause during the war. But not all bent willingly. Rumors reached Mercer of a new conspiracy, surviving Thalrin warlords plotting to assassinate key human leaders and spark a new rebellion. Mercer acted with cold efficiency. Task Force Revenant was deployed, the deadliest of human Black Ops units. Within days, Thalrin's safe houses burned. The bodies of conspirators were left hanging in public squares. Entire bloodlines were erased. Mercer gave no quarter. "Purge them to the roots," he ordered. "No seed of rebellion will remain." And so it was. As months passed, the new human order solidified. Human fleets patrolled every major sector. Jump gates remained under strict human control. Trade flowed, but on Earth's terms. Former council species became vassals. Their fleets were disarmed. Their rulers answered to Earth's high command. Those who resisted were crushed without hesitation. But even as the dominion grew, internal tensions simmered. On Earth, civilian politicians began questioning the endless cycle of military purges. "We have won," some argued. "Now is the time to rebuild, not to rule through fear." But Mercer saw the truth. "We have not won," he told Rorden in a private meeting. "We have only bought time. If we show weakness now, the galaxy will tear us apart." Rorden, weary but pragmatic, agreed. "The peace will be built on steel," he said, "and you will hold the sword." Yet Mercer himself wasn't immune to the cost of endless war. Alone aboard the Indomitable, he often stared out at the stars he had helped conquer. So many dead, so many worlds reduced to ruin. Had it been worth it? The Council's arrogance had sparked the war. But what had humanity become in answering it? He knew the answer. A species hardened beyond recognition, Ruthless, feared, respected, but never loved, and perhaps that was the only way. Final reports reached his desk. Shadowfang eliminated. Thalaran resistance crushed. Council territories pacified. The galaxy was now humanity's. In all but name. In a final address to the High Command, Mercer laid it bare. We have forged an empire through war. If we wish to keep it, we must be prepared to rule as we fought, without pity, without hesitation. The galaxy respects only strength. We will give them strength. There was no dissent, no illusions. The dominion of Earth would be an iron empire, or it would be ashes. And so the story came full circle. Once dismissed, once scorned, once told to kneel. Humanity had rejected diplomacy, and now they ruled the stars. The universe was old. Stars had burned for billions of years. Civilizations had risen and fallen, and countless empires had etched their names into the fabric of time. But when they looked at Earth, they saw a species that had barely crawled out of its cradle. To them, we were young, naive, and primitive. They had no idea we were the elders. It started with the arrival of the Vasun, a highly advanced interstellar race that saw themselves as galactic peacekeepers. Their ships, sleek and silver, descended into Earth's orbit like celestial gods coming to bless a new species. They broadcasted their message in every language. Humans, we are the Vasun. We bring knowledge, technology, and enlightenment. You have much to learn. At first we listened. The world's leaders gathered, eager to welcome these visitors who promised an age of prosperity. They spoke of how their civilizations had flourished for millions of years, how they had mapped the universe, studied the cosmos, and unlocked the secrets of life itself. They believed we were still finding our place in the stars. They didn't know. They didn't see the scars written in our history, the eons of war, the rise and fall of empires, the countless lessons etched into our DNA. We had forgotten more than most species would ever learn. When the Vasun began offering guidance, we played along. They taught us their philosophies, their science, their technology, believing we were finally joining the cosmic stage. They showed us energy manipulation beyond our comprehension, warp technology that defied physics, and medicine that could cure any disease. But they didn't understand the truth. They didn't understand why we weren't in awe. They mistook our silence for ignorance. Then came the mistake, the moment everything changed. A Vasun delegation visited Earth's museums. They saw artifacts from civilizations thousands of years old, ancient ruins, primitive tools, skeletal remains of forgotten ancestors. And they laughed. Your history is barely a whisper. Your species is still crawling, one of them had said. And that was when we showed them the ruins. Not just the pyramids, not just the Mayan temples, not just the forgotten cities buried beneath sand and jungle. We took them deeper, beneath the earth itself. We showed them structures that predated humanity, architecture built by hands that history had erased, machines buried in stone that no scientist could explain. We showed them the remnants of lost ages, hints of civilizations that had risen and fallen long before recorded time. And then we told them. We told them about the cycles, that humanity had not merely risen once, but many times, that we had reached the stars before, conquered the void, built empires among the galaxies, and then vanished. We told them about the wars that had shattered entire star systems, about the knowledge that had been lost and rediscovered over and over again. We told them that Earth was not our first home, it was our last. The Vasun went silent. They scanned our planet again, not just its surface, but its deepest layers. Their technology searched through mountains, oceans, and underground caverns, and they found them, the echoes of lost ages, the remains of civilization so old they defied comprehension. And then they realized. We were not young. We were old. Older than them. Older than most of the galactic races they knew. They had come to teach us. But they were the ones who had something to learn. And when the others came, the true predators of the stars, the ones who saw all new species as prey, humanity was not afraid. We remembered. We always remembered. And this time, we would not fall. This time, we would teach the galaxy what it meant to awaken the elders. The Vasoon delegation left Earth in silence. Their once condescending demeanor had vanished, replaced by a quiet, almost fearful respect. They had come expecting to uplift a young species, but they left with the unsettling realization that they had just awakened something far older than they had imagined. And word spread. Other galactic races soon turned their eyes toward Earth. Some came with curiosity, eager to learn from this so-called ancient species. Others, however, saw an opportunity. If humanity had truly been powerful once, then surely they had fallen for a reason. If Earth was the graveyard of past civilizations, then perhaps it was also ripe for conquest. They had no idea what they were walking into. The first test came just a year after the Vasoon revelation. The Zelthar Dominion, a war-hardened empire that had conquered dozens of worlds, saw Earth as weak. The galaxy's whispers of ancient humans meant nothing to them. Words were not weapons. They saw a planet without interstellar fleets, without planetary defenses, without warships patrolling its skies. To them, humanity was a relic, a species clinging to old stories, nothing more. So they invaded. They came in towering warships, each one bristling with enough firepower to reduce continents to ash. They entered Earth's orbit unchallenged, broadcasting their demands in a dozen languages. Surrender, serve, or be erased. For a moment the world held its breath, and then we responded. It wasn't with diplomacy, it wasn't with desperation, it was with laughter. They had come thinking we were weak. But the truth was, we had simply been patient. The skies above Earth lit up with fire. Hidden within the depths of our oceans, buried beneath mountains, and concealed within the void of space itself, our true weapons came to life. Technologies long thought lost roared back to existence. Massive cannons, powered by energies that should not exist in a young species, tore through Zelthar warships like paper. Orbital defenses, remnants of an era long before this one, activated with cold, mechanical precision. The Earth itself seemed to fight back, as if it had been waiting for this moment. And then the ground forces landed. Zelthar soldiers, towering insectoid creatures clad in unbreakable exoskeletons, expected resistance. They expected desperate gunfire, makeshift defenses, primitive attempts at defiance. They did not expect the cities themselves to become weapons. The moment they touched the ground, ancient machines hidden beneath the streets awoke. Walls reshaped themselves into barriers, streets cracked open to reveal hidden artillery, and entire buildings shifted into armored fortresses. They had no idea how many times we had fought this war before. They had no idea we had designed our world to fight back. The battle lasted 3 days. On the 4th, the Zelthar fleet burned in the sky, their flagship torn in half. Their invasion force was no more. The few who survived were allowed to leave, not as victors, not even as equals, but as messengers. Messengers who would spread one undeniable truth across the stars. Humanity was not to be underestimated. We were not young. We were the ones who had come before, and this time we would not fade away. The Zelthar fled, their shattered fleet limping back into deep space, their empire forever changed by the horror they had unleashed upon themselves. The message was clear. Earth was not to be touched. but in the void beyond, the stars whispered. Other empires watched, calculating, weighing their options. Humanity had survived an invasion, but surviving was not the same as thriving. The galactic elite had seen countless species rise, fight, and eventually break under the weight of sustained war. To them, this was a test of endurance. They had no idea we had done this before, and we would do it again. For the next 3 years, the universe held its breath. No empire dared to strike openly, but we were not naive. The whispers of hidden plots, of spies and sabotage reached our ears. Some species sought alliances, some sought control, and others simply wanted to know the truth. Had humanity really walked the stars before? Did we truly have knowledge beyond our years? And if we did, why had we fallen? The answers lay beneath Antarctica. For decades, human archaeologists had puzzled over an impossible structure hidden deep within the ice. Satellite scans showed it was too symmetrical, too precise to be natural. But when the Vasoon had rescanned our planet, they had confirmed what we had long suspected. It was a ship. Not just any ship. An ark, a relic of a time before this era, buried beneath frozen wastelands. A remnant of a war that had erased entire galaxies from history. When we unearthed it, the truth became undeniable. The ship's systems, ancient beyond comprehension, still held records, fragmented, corrupted by time, but not lost. They told of a war against something beyond the known universe, a war that had forced humanity to retreat, to erase itself from the galactic stage, to bury its knowledge so that the enemy could never find it. We had not fallen. We had chosen to disappear. And now, with the Ark's systems awakening, the question was no longer whether humanity would return to the stars. It was whether the thing we had once fought would notice. The warning came on the 4th year, a deep space relay, a Vasoon station monitoring the outer reaches of the known galaxy, sent a final transmission before falling silent. No ships had been seen approaching. No signals had been detected, yet the station was simply gone. And then the message arrived, not in words, not in threats, but in a single ancient symbol burned into space itself, etched across the void like a scar. We knew it. We had seen it before. And we had spent countless ages hoping to never see it again. The elders of humanity had awakened. But so had our greatest enemy. The war we had once lost was coming back. This time, we would be ready. The galaxy didn't understand what was coming. To them, the Vasoon station had simply vanished. A mystery, an anomaly, something to be investigated in due time. But we knew better. We had seen this before. The symbol burned into the void was older than any empire in existence, older than any civilization still standing. It was a warning, a declaration, a whisper from something that should have remained forgotten. The enemy had returned. In secret, we began preparations. Earth's governments, fractured and divided for so long, now stood united under a single purpose: survival. War was coming, and we would not fight it alone. The ark beneath Antarctica was just the beginning. Hidden across our planet, buried beneath mountains, lost beneath oceans, were the remnants of our past selves, fragments of a civilization that had once spanned the stars. The ark's systems led us to them. Deep beneath the Himalayas, we unearthed another vault, one that had not been opened in over 100,000 years. Within it, we found what the Ark had promised: weapons. Not just guns, not just missiles, but technologies so advanced, so devastating that even the greatest galactic empires could not comprehend them. Ships built for war, sleek and black, lined in metals that defied modern understanding. Weapons that could bend space, tear through shields, and reduce planets to dust. Humanity had once been a superpower, and we were about to be one again. But the enemy was already moving. The first real attack came on the edges of the known galaxy, in a system controlled by the Ixari Confederacy. One moment, their colony world was there. The next, it was gone. Erased, as if it had never existed. No distress calls, no survivors. Just empty space where an entire civilization had once stood. The Vasoon panicked. For the first time in their long history, they did not have an answer. Their technology could not detect the attackers. Their fleets could not retaliate against an enemy that left no trace. But we knew. This was how it had started last time. This was why we had vanished. And this time, we would not run. The first human fleet launched 6 months later. It was a sight no other species had ever witnessed. A fleet of ships, not new, but ancient, rebuilt from the remains of a forgotten empire, powered by technology no living race could match. They were sleek, dark, almost alive in their movements, and they carried a single message to the stars. Humanity had returned. We were not the children of the galaxy. We were the last remnants of something greater. And this time, we would not be erased. The enemy finally revealed itself. A rift tore open in the fabric of space, blacker than the void itself. From within, they came, silent, formless, shifting things, existing half in reality and half outside of it. They did not speak. They did not negotiate. They consumed. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. The Vasoon, the Zelthar, the Ixari, all of them sent ships, desperate to fight an enemy they did not understand. Their weapons failed. Their defenses crumbled. But humanity had faced them before. And this time, we did not come unprepared. The moment the enemy emerged, our weapons roared to life. Not lasers, not missiles, but something older, something built not to kill but to erase. The enemy faltered. For the first time in its long, endless existence, it hesitated. Because we were not like the others. We remembered. And we had returned for vengeance. The first strike was devastating. Galactic fleets burned, shattered by an enemy they could not comprehend. The Zelthar warships, their pride and arrogance still fresh from their defeat on Earth, were the first to fall. Their shields flickered, their weapons fired blindly into the void, but it was useless. The enemy did not fight conventionally. It did not rely on ships, on fleets, on physical form. It was something else entirely. A hunger, a force, something that devoured reality itself. The Zelthar died screaming. The Ixari were next, their delicate crystalline ships dissolving into nothingness as the enemy simply unmade them. No debris, no wreckage, just empty space where entire vessels had once been. The Vasoon, the so-called peacekeepers of the stars, tried to flee. Their ships flickered, jumping to warp, but they never arrived at their destinations. One by one, their escape routes collapsed into blackened voids, as if the universe itself had swallowed them whole. Panic spread. The galaxy was losing, and then humanity struck back. We had been here before. We had fought this war before, but last time we had been unprepared. We had not understood the enemy. We had not known how to stop it. Now, we did. The first human warship to enter the battle was Exodus Prime, an ancient vessel, its hull reforged from metals that no living scientist could explain. It moved with impossible precision, as if space itself bent around it. It carried no conventional weapons. Instead, it wielded something far more dangerous, the Echo Cannon. A weapon built in another time, for another war, a weapon designed not to destroy the enemy, but to erase it from existence entirely. With a single pulse, Exodus Prime fired. The void itself rippled, and for the first time, the enemy recoiled. The attack did not just damage it, it remembered. It had faced this before. It had won last time, but now things were different, because now humanity remembered too. And this time, we would not lose. Across the battlefield, human warships emerged, not from hyperspace, not from jump points, but from hidden locations scattered across the galaxy. Forgotten strongholds buried deep within uncharted space. Humanity had never truly fallen. We had simply waited. And now, the waiting was over. The counterattack was relentless. Every human ship was a relic of the past, rebuilt, reforged, improved. Weapons that had once been abandoned were now unleashed in full force. The echo cannons struck again, tearing through the void, unraveling the enemy piece by piece. The galaxy watched in disbelief. They had thought Earth was young. They had thought humanity was just beginning. Now they saw the truth. We were the last remnants of the first Great War. We were the ones who had fought before, who had lost, who had hidden. We were not new to the stars. We were their ancestors, and this time, we would be their salvation. The battle raged for days. The enemy, once unstoppable, now faltered. It had underestimated us. It had assumed we were as weak as the others. It had believed we had forgotten. But we had spent thousands of years preparing for this. We had never forgotten. And now, for the first time in history, the enemy feared. Because humanity did not just fight wars, we ended them. The enemy was vast. It was ancient, older than the galaxies themselves. It had erased civilizations before, consuming them, devouring their histories until not even memories remained. But it had never faced something like us. We were not the strongest, not the fastest, not even the most advanced, but we endured. And that was what the enemy feared the most. The final stage of the war began in the ruins of a dead system, one whose name had been forgotten long before the first modern races had even crawled from their homeworlds. The remains of shattered planets hung in the void like gravestones, silent, lifeless. It was here that the enemy made its last stand, and it was here that we finished what had begun eons ago. The battle was unlike anything recorded in history. The enemy did not fight as others did. It did not rely on fleets, on strategy, on logic. It was a force of destruction, a presence that twisted the very fabric of space itself. But we had learned its weaknesses. We had uncovered the truths buried deep in the ruins of our lost past. The echo cannons had wounded it. The ancient warships had held the line. But it would not be enough to simply drive the enemy back. We had to erase it, and for that, we needed the final weapon. For centuries, it had been hidden beneath the surface of Mars, buried under layers of rock and dust, waiting for the moment when humanity would need it once more. It had no name. Its creators had ensured that even the memory of it had been forgotten. But the Ark had remembered, and now, so did we. The final ship, Oblivion's Wake, carried the weapon to the battlefield. It was not a bomb, not a superweapon. It was something far more dangerous. It was a reset, a construct of impossible energy, built to rewrite reality itself, to erase the enemy from existence, not just in the present, but in the past, in the future, in every timeline it had ever touched. It was the reason humanity had vanished once before, because the last time we had tried to use it, we had failed, and the cost had been everything. As Oblivion's Wake reached the battlefield, the enemy sensed it. It remembered the weapon. It screamed, not in sound, not in words, but in something deeper, something primal. The void itself trembled as it tried to stop us. Reality twisted. Stars flickered. Entire ships vanished, erased from time before they could even fire. But we were ready. Humanity's fleets formed a wall of steel and fire. Standing between the enemy and the weapon, we took the hits. We held the line. We endured. And as Oblivion's Wake reached the heart of the battlefield, the weapon activated. Light erupted, not just in space, not just in the present, but everywhere, everywhere the enemy had ever been, everywhere it had touched, corrupted, consumed. Time itself shuddered. And then, silence, The galaxy held its breath. For the first time in untold eons, the enemy was gone, not defeated, not banished, erased. No trace remained. The worlds it had consumed, restored, the civilizations it had devoured, remembered, and in the silence that followed, the truth became clear. Humanity had not just survived the war, we had won it. The galaxy changed after that. The Vasoon, the Zelthar, the Ixari, they no longer looked at us as children. They no longer saw Earth as a backwater world, a species barely stepping into the stars. They knew the truth now. We were not young, we were not new, we were the elders of the universe, the ones who had come before, and now we had returned. This time, we would not disappear. This time we would ensure that nothing like the enemy could ever rise again. This time, the galaxy would remember. And so humanity stepped forward, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as guardians, because we remembered what the others had forgotten, that some threats never truly die, that some wars never truly end, and that next time we would be ready because humanity always endures, and we would be watching. Forever.